Greetings and welcome back to L.A. Quill. Writing a novel is one of those ambitions that sounds deceptively simple when spoken aloud. You want to tell a story. You have an idea. Maybe you even have the beginning and you're excited about it. And yet, once you sit down to actually write, the weight of what you're attempting settles in very quickly. A novel isn't just a premise or a collection of scenes. It's a living structure built from choices, consequences, and, most importantly, characters who feel real enough that readers believe in them. One of the most common struggles I see among aspiring and intermediate writers, especially in fantasy, is not world building or magical systems, but character realism. The setting may be breathtaking, the lore may be intricate, the plot may be ambitious, but if the characters don't respond to events in believable, emotionally grounded ways, well, the illusion breaks. Readers stop trusting the story, even if they can't quite articulate why. Realistic characters don't mean ordinary characters. They don't need to behave safely or predictably. In fact, some of the most memorable characters make shocking or even frustrating decisions. What makes them realistic is those decisions make sense for them. Their reactions arise naturally from who they are, what they fear, what they desire, and what they believe about the world. Today, I want to talk about two powerful techniques that can help you create characters who feel alive on the page. These techniques are deceptively simple, but when used consistently, they can unlock stalled plots, deepen emotional resonance, and help you avoid writing yourself into corners you can't escape. The first technique is learning to play what if with your characters. Once you understand the fundamentals of storytelling, the structure, the conflict, the stakes, you might assume that the next step is simply execution. But many writers find that once the opening chapters are written, uncertainty creeps in. What should happen next? What would this character realistically do when faced with this obstacle? How far would they go? Where would they draw the line? This is where what if becomes invaluable. Instead of forcing yourself to find the single correct answer, you give yourself permission to explore multiple possibilities. You step away from the pressure of commitment and into a space of experimentation. Imagine your character at a crossroads, literal or metaphorical. Instead of asking, what happens next, ask a series of questions. What if they chose a selfish option? What if they hesitate? What if they act out of fear rather than courage? What if they do one thing that complicates everything and the whole story is now derailed? These questions, they're not meant to be answered immediately or even definitively. They're meant to open doors. When you write them down on paper, in a document, in a notebook, on a scrap piece of paper, you externalize the problem. You stop wrestling with it entirely in your head, and suddenly the story just starts to feel more flexible, even more alive. As you explore each what if, jot down a few notes. You don't need full scenes. A paragraph or even a few bullet points is enough. Focus on cause and effect. If the character makes this choice, what happens next? How does it ripple outward? Who is affected and how? Often, one possibility will begin to glow brighter than any of the others. It will feel inevitable, not because it's easy, but because it aligns with the character's internal logic. That's when you know you found something authentic, something worth pursuing. Just as importantly, don't discard your other ideas. Those unused what-ifs, they're not failures, they're resources. A choice that doesn't fit in this chapter might become vital later in the story, or even in another book entirely, especially if you're writing books with recurring characters. In a shared world where you're going to run into these guys again, you might need that idea. Many long-running fantasy series owe their depths to the author's willingness to explore alternate paths before committing to one. The reader may only see the final version, but the richness of that version often comes from the unseen exploration beneath it. Now, the second technique is putting yourself in your character's place, truly and deliberately. It's easy to say, Imagine how your character feels. It's much harder to do it in a way that goes beyond surface level assumptions. Too often, writers rely on shorthand emotions, fear and anger and joy and grief. But real experiences are layered. They're physical as well as emotional. They're shaped by memory, expectation, and context. When you find yourself unsure how a character would react in a certain situation, try becoming that character for a moment. This doesn't mean method acting in a theatrical sense, though you can do that if that works for you, that's fine. But what it really means is slowing down and asking a few deeper questions. What does your character notice first in this moment? Take a look around. What are they noticing? What are they trying not to think about? What sensations do they feel in their body? Are they cold or tired or hungry, overstimulated, afraid of being seen or afraid of being alone? These things will impact their choices. In fantasy writing especially, it's easy to gloss over those sensory realities in favor of spectacle. Battles happen, magic explodes, worlds end. But your character is still standing there, inside a body, processing it in real time. Sometimes direct experience can help. So if you're writing about physical exertion or discomfort or environmentally challenging, experiencing something similar, even in a small way, can add surprising authenticity. You don't need to replicate the exact scenario. You need to understand the sensation. If your character is exhausted after a forced march, think about the last time you were physically depleted. If they're navigating fear, recall a moment when your own heart raced and your thoughts narrowed. Those internal responses translate across settings, even when the external circumstances are fantastical. This technique also works for dialogue and interpersonal scenes. If you're struggling to write a conversation that feels natural, say it out loud. Play both roles if you have to. Notice where the dialogue feels stiff or kind of artificial, where it kind of lags. Real conversations are rarely perfectly balanced or fully eloquent. They're interrupted, deflected, emotionally charged. Nobody waits for everyone to get their thought out of their head before they start yabbering. So, by embodying your characters this way, even briefly, you gain insight into how they might react in moments of stress or intimacy or decision making. You stop writing about them and you start writing from them. These two techniques, playing what if and stepping into your character's place, work best when used together. One explores external possibility. The other deepens internal truth. When combined, they help ensure that your plot is not just a sequence of events, but a chain of meaningful choices driven by believable people. It's worth acknowledging that every writer eventually writes themselves into a corner. We've all done it. That isn't a sign of failure. It's a sign that you're pushing beyond the obvious. Corners appear where characters feel boxed in by previous decisions, or where the plot demands something that doesn't feel emotionally honest. When that happens, resist the urge to force a solution. Step back. Ask your what-if questions again. Re-enter the character's perspective. Often, the way out of the corner isn't a clever twist, but a truer reaction. One that may complicate the story, but also might ultimately strengthen it. Fantasy readers, in particular, are remarkably perceptive when it comes to character authenticity. They may accept dragons and gods and impossible worlds without hesitation, but they will sense when a character's response rings false. Emotional truth is what grounds the impossible and makes it believable. So, focus in on what your character's doing. As you continue working on your novel, remember that realism in characters doesn't come from perfection. It comes from attention. Attention to cause and effect. Attention to emotional continuity. Attention to how choices shape not only the plot, but the people making those choices. Writing a novel is tricky precisely because it asks you to juggle so many elements at once. But by giving yourself permission to explore possibilities and inhabit your characters more fully, you make the process more intuitive and often more enjoyable. Stories worth telling are rarely linear. They're shaped by hesitation, curiosity, fear, and hope. When your characters reflect those complexities, readers will follow them anywhere, no matter how fantastical the world around them might be. And that's our tale from LA Quill today. Let me know in the comments which character technique you struggle with most, or which one you're excited to try next. Until next time, may your stories always be magical.